This story is supported by the Public Welfare Foundation, committed to advancing a transformative approach to justice that is community-led, restorative, and racially just. Learn more at publicwelfare.org.
Let it be that we heal each other. It is a hortative, what is called a hortative, which is a kind of commanding speech that in our old stories, a character such as Raven would speak, is how he would wish something so strongly into the world. And that is the style of this phrase, wusht goranech, let it be that we healed each other.
The theme, Let It Be That We Heal Each Other, reflected on the ongoing collective healing of Alaska Native people, communities, and lands, waters, and animals at the First Alaskans Institute's 2023 Elders and Youth Conference.
There's one of the phrases the elders say is, Hayusane Hayu Hatangi. Our language healed us. I feel like, our languages are able to give us insights to our identity, our place in the world, and what it will take in order to be able to get us there. That acceptance of that love, that courage, and those wisdoms that are within our language will have its effect upon us. And we'll find that that connection is unforgettable, and that we all have that thirst that's, I believe, been given to us by our Creator.
Hundreds of people from across Alaska gathered in Anchorage to learn from one another, take part in cultural workshops, and engage in meaningful dialogues with healing at the focal point.
I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and I was actually living in Michigan at the time because my then husband, we're from Juneau, but we were living in Michigan so that he could go to school to become a doctor. And that's when I learned that our family was struggling with patterns of power and control. And so actually my parents, who were living in Occoquan in Juneau, brought me home to Juneau, and I call myself a refugee because my home wasn't safe and my parents brought me home. So I actually had my first support system from the Aware shelter in Juneau. And I would drive to the beach at Auk, which is where our longhouses used to stay. And so as I learned about trying to recognize that domestic violence was a part of my family and try to heal that, I was able to do that for 6 weeks at home in my homeland with my parents and with a women's shelter that really helped teach me that it's not just physical, that it's emotional, verbal, psychological, financial, that even the legal struggle can become a part of those patterns of power and control. That really helped me understand my journey because, physical violence was just a very small experience, but the emotional, verbal, psychological abuse was the majority of it. And so I didn't recognize it as domestic violence until I talked to someone. And so then I find that when I'm in circles that I share that I'm a survivor and I tell a little bit of my story and my journey, then other people come to me and they tell me a little bit about their story and their journey, and then we can hold each other up.
Those working on healing efforts recognize the need to have open conversations about trauma and the impacts of colonization.
Every Alaska Native person has had some kind of experience with boarding schools, and most not so not so good.
Sam works on repatriation efforts, bringing the remains of boarding school students home.
There are 30,000 of our people still out there that want to come home. And for the last 5 years, I've been preparing for them. Cleaning graves, finding family plots, finding loved ones, lineal descendants, and letting them know where their loved ones are buried. And I have a laptop that I have of where people are passed away 150 years ago. So I trained myself to find bodies. And I trained myself to speak in public so that I could articulate myself in such a way that I could talk about this comfortably, because our people cannot talk about this stuff comfortably. There's taboos involved with it, cultural stuff, but somebody has to bring the body home. And I'm a guy that does this work. I've done it my whole life, and I'm comfortable with it. I've touched physical remains and brought them home. I've reinterned them back into the ground, so I have a history of that now. And now it's time to pass it down to the next generation, because the lineal descendants, they are the ones that have the ultimate authority. They are the ones that should be the ones to decide what to do with the body. And it's a very painful job. As I got older, ceremony has become the most important thing. Ceremony. When we bring back our ceremonies or develop a new one for return for the body, our whole spirit begins to change. We used to carry ourselves like a wounded warrior, but when we put our ceremony back into our body, we get energy, we get power, we get indigenous power, we get, our back gets straight, our voice gets stronger. It's like our ancestors are coming into us. That's how we should be. So we put all our regalia on, all our tunics, our drum, and we're going to put it on to you too. We're going to heal together. And we're going to take our rightful place in society. And this country is going to love us. I think they love us already.
I think that learning about our history, and even though a lot of it has been horrific, and sometimes we might not think we even know the history, it's maybe not available to us, but learning about some of the boarding schools and some of the traumas that we did have is part of the healing, so that we can recognize what our family has gone through and what our parents or grandparents or our ancestors, what they've done and how they've suffered, but also how we're moving forward today. So recognizing the past, I think we have to do that in order for us to know where we want to go in the future. So for me, I was ashamed a lot growing up. I was never Native enough, or I was too much Native, but I didn't know a lot of the history, and I didn't know the stories of my people, or the songs, or the language, or even the personal stories of the boarding schools that my grandparents went to. But since then, I've learned some of those things, and I'm still learning, and it's been really helpful in really, I think, turning that shame or guilt into an understanding, and then eventually into love. Really, it's such a powerful way to heal when we learn about our history, and learn about who we are, and our connection and how beautiful we are as Indigenous people.
Part of the healing process is being honest about what's going on in tribal communities and self-reflection. That's one tribal leader's approach.
I was addicted to methamphetamine, and I have enjoyed about a little over 20 years being clean. And I've had people tell me, you know, you're the president of Clinton Ida. You should not tell people that. You shouldn't talk about that. You know, you could risk not getting reelected. And my answer is this every time: because I'm the president of Clinton Ida, I should share that with people. People need to know recovery is possible. And one thing about me and how I got clean was accountability. And I'm not going to lie about it. I'm not going to hide it. I'm going to take accountability for my mistakes, and I'm going to endeavor to do better today than I did yesterday. And that's become my mantra through life. And I think as a leader, you have to stand up and you have to reveal that self, that your vulnerabilities and where you've made mistakes. But you can also show that recovery is possible if you put in the work, that you can do better, you can be better, and guess what? You'll feel better. Healing's a journey. And it's like any journey, it's usually better walked with others. And I want to be the person to walk with people and support them and make sure that they have what they need to walk that journey successfully.
The healing journey for some includes embracing the land, plants, and food medicine.
Food and our plants can feed us, but but emotionally, spiritually, and in all of those ways. And so, getting out on the land, I think, is it's like a ceremony. And so, any ways that we can teach our children, and even people my age, have never gone out and gotten certain plants or harvested, or just being out there together, I think is wonderful. With like exercise, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of those things come to play. And the power of our plants, the cedar, the red cedar is we use this for everything in Ketchikan, for our longhouses, our basketry, our medicine, our totem poles, our canoes, and much more. And of course, the teaching around this plant is generosity and kindness. And you could see, because cedar's been so generous to us. And I think wherever it grows, it's used in a special way, wherever you find cedar. And so I think the plants themselves teach us. So getting out on the land, each of the plants have their gifts to share with us too, if we listen.
Finding solutions and healing communities often starts with grassroots movements and young people.
All of the things that we work on are going to be passed down to them, right? We also know that we're not going to solve it in our lifetime, so we have to be, readying the next generation of people who are going to do this work and preparing them for what it looks like to do this work. And so I think just the power of intergenerational interaction, we also make sure we all have elders in our spaces, because we know as Native people that it's so important for us to, be having that intergenerational communication of values and knowledge.
We 100% believe in tribal sovereignty, and our community members make up who our tribe is, right? And our community elects our tribal leaders. Our community members are a critical part of shaping our community, and we believe that the people closest to the issue or closest to the problem, they're also the closest to the solutions. They know what's going to work in their community. And so that's why we really hold at the foundation following the direction of local community members and supporting them in creating the solutions that they see, and supporting them in the advocacy.
Alaska Native people are using their language, culture, and the land as part of healing efforts from trauma. Elders, young people, community leaders, advocates, and artists are among those continuing to raise awareness of missing and murdered Indigenous people in Alaska. They want to make sure their loved ones are remembered. They're also continuing to seek justice for those who've gone missing and murdered.
I wanted to create an impact that involved creating conversation in our community, because I know that a lot of our Indigenous folks know the problems we face, with our missing and murdered relatives, but a lot of our non-Indigenous members of our community do not. And so I created those red dresses to create a conversation. It was inspired by the portrait that Dustin Newman, a fellow Unanga artist, created, which represented our missing and murdered sisters here from all areas of Alaska. And when I saw the portrait, I decided that I wanted to make those dresses come alive.
Our Sisters Red Dress collection has been shown in Alaska, Washington State, and has journeyed all the way to Paris. It was recently the centerpiece of an exhibit at the Washington History Museum in Seattle, where it received much public attention.
Well, I think for a lot of our Indigenous community, people have come up and told me that it was healing, and they shared their stories in relations to a missing murder relative. And then non-Indigenous folks have come up. I answered their questions for them, and it was very eye-opening for a lot of people. Personally, for me, when I was little, when I was young, when I was 8, my best friend in school was taken by her stepfather. And then several years down the road, my cousin was also taken by her partner. So, so that's been, kind of near and dear to me. And then also just knowing, friends and relatives experiencing the same.
Other Alaska Native artists are also featuring their work to raise awareness of missing and murdered Indigenous people.
I didn't realize until I did the project how many women I knew who had either been murdered or gone missing, and I didn't realize how big of an impact that had on shaping my identity, like how I walk around in the world, where I'll go and where I won't go, and how I teach my daughters to be safe. Because I think the first time that I knew of a Native woman that had been murdered, I was very young, and I don't even know how I knew she was Native, but there was a story in the newspaper that my parents were talking about this woman that was found at Kincaid Park, and I don't know how I knew, but I just knew she was Native. And so even at 7 years old, I had an understanding that that was the reality that we experienced.
It's also personal for Webb, who had a family friend go missing. Several years ago, Webb had an overwhelming sense to do something. She created a nearly 13-foot tall cussbuck featuring hand-drawn portraits with permanent marker of women who've gone missing or have been murdered to make sure they're honored and not forgotten.
I realized I wasn't going to be able to find portraits of all of the Native women from Alaska who've been murdered because there was no way to even quantify that. In my grandmother and my great-grandmother's generation, nobody was tracking that. People don't even know. And so I decided to look to the work that was being done in Canada and all over North America, and I wanted to honor all of the activism that had been happening. And this was people's grandmas, people's aunties, people who died before anything happened, like people who lived their whole lives fighting for this. Those are the people that made us who we are, and those are the people that allowed all of us who are doing activism now to have a platform to do what we're doing.
Webb also wants to make sure stereotypes are dispelled.
The violence happens anywhere Native women are, and it's a part of colonization. And then I started realizing that it was really tied into the experience of boarding school trauma and tied into the experience of that people had during forced removal, and that the violence we're experiencing today is the same violence that our grandmas and our great-grandmas experienced. And when we talk about violence, it's really important to name it. It's important to name where the violence comes from and who's doing it. You could say Native women are killed at alarming rates, or you could say people are killing Native women, and who are those people? And we know that 90% of them are non-Native people. And even the ones that are Native are coming from places who have experienced high rates of trauma.
Those who've survived violence say communities need to have support systems and lift taboos, making it safe to talk about violence in order to help in the healing process.
To have the community really acknowledge that our women have suffered and that they need all of us to gather and to heal, right? Because what we want to do is we want to break the silence, to break the cycle, so that the next generations don't have this same level of trauma that we have. But we want to teach them how to have healthy coping skills, how to reach out to people and get the support that you need to heal.
It may be hard for Alaska Native communities to confront these tough issues, but a tribal leader is having some hard conversations in his work and his own self-reflection as a leader.
When you talk about, domestic violence, when you talk about murdered and missing Indigenous women and people, that through line of trauma is there. And it's hard to have to admit some of these things. It's hard to have these conversations and realize when you look across the nation and you look at other groups of people, Native Americans, Alaskan Natives are not treated with equity. Some of the programs, we get the lowest percentage of recognition of funding, and we're expected to do more. And you create programs that put a pocket here, a pocket there of funding, but you have to have wraparound services. You have to have healing as part of it.
Government officials say addressing missing and murdered Indigenous people needs collaboration on all levels, from federal, state, local to the community. U.S. Department of Justice representatives talked about action on MMIP taking place in Alaska on the radio show Alaska's Native Voice.
One of the ways we're trying to address some of the problems in the past is in 50s and 60s and 70s, you'd have some bureaucrat in Washington say, well, we've studied the issue theoretically and we've developed this plan, and here's the plan, boom, it's a cookie-cutter approach all across Alaska or even in the lower 48. What we're trying to do now, and the great thing about this, is we go into the village, we say we're here to help, we provide a framework to talk, but it's their plan. We are also with the Alaska Tribal Public Safety Commission. We're meeting for the next couple years with natives and all law enforcement to develop something that comes up from the ground up that we hope will address the actual problems on the ground and not those theoretical helicopter problems that the people in Washington so often see. So we are very hopeful that by involving the communities to the extent we are, that we can address a lot of those previous problems that we had.
We've listened all over Alaska. So we partner with the regional associations here in Alaska, and started that really when I started the work, going out and doing listening sessions. And what we have heard is we have heard stories like Brian talks about of resilience, of healing, and really of that that history. We've talked about solutions with families, but we've definitely talked about the history of what those families are walking through, and how do we change that narrative? How do we change the history and make sure that it is different for the children that are coming now? Develop safety plans to make sure that we are creating a safer Alaska, that public safety is the expectation that we expect in every community, is the expectation that we're going to see all over Alaska. We just had a listening session last night with the Alaska Tribal Public Safety Advisory Committee, which was established by VAWA, the reauthorization of 2022. And, we had community members and agency leaders there telling us, this is something we have to do. We absolutely need to increase public safety, and they're telling us that that includes, again, building that tribal capacity. Giving authority or supporting that enhanced tribal capacity. And you see some of that in VAWA, that recognition again of that jurisdiction that they had, that was their concurrent jurisdiction with tribal authority and the different authorities. And so just recognizing that and having them exercise that's something that we hear a lot from our tribal folks.
I think that we all need to use our voices to kind of stand up for our relatives who can't speak. And I know that sometimes it's really hard to use our voices, and I'm getting better at using my voice and sharing the story of our relatives. And I'm just going to keep sharing the collection for as long as I can and for as long as I have to.
So when people look at each one of those faces, I want them to see the humanity and the life that was there. Because it's not about how they died, it's about how they lived. And it's about how we live in their honor and how we protect each other.
This story is supported by the Public Welfare Foundation, committed to advancing a transformative approach to justice that is community-led, restorative, and racially just. Learn more at publicwelfare.org.